Janel. Welcome to the Surthriving podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to get started.
Just as a quick bring people up to speed, I was on what I call now like a single 30-something weekend. I had no plans that weekend. I took myself out to lunch, and then I decided to stop in a little boutique, and Janel was sitting there just working, and we got talking, and we were talking about like just life and being 30-year-old women and figuring out our paths and stuff like that. And one thing led to another, and now we're friends, and it's so cool to have you here.
I know. I love our story because it truly is like the magic of just being out in the world and meeting someone organically, kind of like the old-fashioned way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like friend dating.
Right. It's like, who meets people that way anymore?
Yeah.
But it is so difficult to make new friends, especially as an adult in your 30s, as a woman. And I feel like the way that we became friends, just so like you wouldn't believe it unless you experience it. It almost sounds fake.
Yeah, it does almost sound fake, but it was just so organic, and I felt very like seen in that like conversation that we had in the boutique.
I think that story is a cool illustration too, that like I'm just figuring things out, because at the time I was working a couple of hours in a retail job while I was running my own business, right? Because like running my own business was very lonely. And from the outside, it can look like, oh, girl boss crushing it. But I literally got a retail job at a local boutique in our neighborhood just to interact with people. And yeah, like having a nice little discount at a place that I shopped at anyway was nice, but it was for the reason that you and I met that I got that job in the first place. So there were definitely some lonely times behind the scenes that drove me there.
Really appreciate that you said that, because that is a huge theme of this podcast. So like the one posing question that I start every episode with that I'm going to ask you, you can answer it in any way that you're comfortable, is, are you surviving or thriving?
It's a vulnerable question.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'm going to be really honest and say, I think up until recently I was surviving, and now I can say that like I am starting to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like I'm on my way to thriving.
I've only done a couple episodes of this podcast so far, and you are the only person that has kind of combined the two terms and like angled it. I'm there, I'm on my way, I'm on the cusp. I know I'm getting there, but I came from a place where I felt like I was surviving. Yeah. So to be able to be self-aware enough to see like both sides, I think it's not a clean-cut answer, and that's what I'm trying to get at by like doing this podcast.
But I really do relate to like Michelle Obama's whole vibe of becoming. Like, I do feel like I am in the process of becoming, and I'm no longer just like in survival mode, but I've made some pretty key changes and key decisions to now be on my way.
Yeah, that's really important. Self-awareness. I think the root of all of that is self-awareness. So we gave listeners a throwback of like how we met and how we ended up here. Can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Not to make this question more complicated, but I recently started having like a little identity crisis in the fact that I always start telling people about myself, starting with work and what I do in my career, which it's not uncommon. I think we all do that, but I'm trying to like reflect on, is that how I want to start? The way that I introduce myself. For this purpose of this podcast, yes, I will. I'm Janel Abrahami. I'm a career coach, and I am a multi-hyphenate, someone who wants to help other multi-hyphenates figure out a career that works for them. So what that looks like for me is building my own brand and business as a career coach, creating content, creating my newsletter and podcast called Modern Mavericks, and navigating the full-time corporate world at the same time. I've gone through different eras in my career where I was like the corporate baddie, the go-getter, like climbing the ladder, had an identity crisis being like, oh, I checked off all the boxes and I still hate my life. What's going on? Quit corporate, started my own career coaching business, scaled it to 6 figures and replaced my corporate salary, and was still sad doing that too, because I realized I had been building the wrong business model. And so now I'm in my multi-hyphenate era, and I feel like that is really the future of work and careers. I'm just trying to embrace it and bring people along for the ride.
Yeah, and it really speaks to that everyone has a different path, and that you can be checking the boxes, like you said, which is a term that I very deeply relate to that I'm trying to pull away from. You can check all of the boxes and still feel like you're surviving. You can check all the boxes and maybe think that you're thriving, but then look internally and be like, I'm actually not, and I hate this.
Yeah, very much so. And it really only just struck me now sitting down and talking to you about it, that happened twice for me in 2 very different settings. Like I followed the checklist of my corporate career right after college. Like I got hired full time in the company that I was interning for senior year, started my career at an amazing company. My LinkedIn is pretty stacked with like awesome brand names and companies and schools that I've attended. And it's very much like okay, it all looks great. But then at the end of the day, when I would come home from those jobs, or I like looked around during the pandemic after being let go from one of those jobs and realized I don't want to do this anymore. Like I have reached the end of this chapter. But then I went a completely different direction and was a solo entrepreneur, really just like grinding by myself in my 1-bedroom apartment,
Wow.
single, and realized that like that wasn't really allowing me to thrive either. I was still in survival mode. And so I never really took the moment to reflect that like I had 2 moments where I was like, hang on, I did everything that I was supposed to do that I thought was going to lead me to happiness, and it didn't. And so now I'm in a very much like, we're navigating, trying to do it all and not just sticking to one thing, but like maybe I can have both.
Okay, so pivoting a little bit, I know that you really are passionate about people doing their career their own way, having a side hustle, building a personal brand, and your career coaching, helping people land a better 9 to 5, and really just this becoming era evolving into yourself. So in your definition, what is a personal brand?
Your personal brand is how someone would describe you when you're not around. And in today's world, it can be a platform for you to honestly build a career around just being yourself.
Social media has really pulled that into the norm, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it's really easy for us to think personal brand as like influencer, like Alex Earl is a personal brand, and just like being paid to be an influencer. And it can be that. But the way that I think about personal brand and the way that it shows up in my own career and the people that I help is getting more vocal and more visible about what you're great at, what makes you stand out, and using that to attract opportunities that you're super excited about. So for example, I've built my personal brand through creating content, yes, on Instagram and TikTok, but also on LinkedIn. Like, not to brag, but I'm kind of a big deal on LinkedIn.
You are actually. I actually recently connected and followed with you, which I'm surprised I didn't do way sooner. And immediately, like 3 of your posts came up. Not to brag, I was in one of the pictures.
Yeah. Like, it sounds so nerdy, but honestly, if you are intimidated or like, oh my gosh, I could never be a quote unquote content creator in the way that a lot of us think about it, start posting on LinkedIn. You get to be a little nerdier. You get to be like a little like dorkier there because it's around what you do professionally. And if you just start to get a little bit more vocal and a little bit more visible around what you think about your industry, what you know about your expertise, and what you're doing that sets you apart, you will start to attract really, really epic professional, career, personal opportunities. One of my friends, Ashna, who I've interviewed for my podcast, put it so well. I just like to quote her. She said, the more I share my life, the more opportunities come around that are worth sharing. And I strongly believe in that for your professional life too. The more you share about your work, the more you share about what's going on in your career, the more opportunities come around that you're so excited to share.
Yeah. Do you think that that also is a parallel effect into your personal life? If someone's passionate about something in their personal life, that they can build a personal brand there as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you can think about it in like 2 different ways. One would be the personal brands that you see out there who are like, hey, get ready with me, or like come with me on a weekend trip to the Catskills, or like spend a Sunday with me in Hoboken, right? Like that can be around your personal life. Or even if you're just into something super cool and niche, like coin collecting or oh my gosh, one of my best friends is such an incredible thrifter and like a vintage antique hunter. And like that can be her personal brand that she invests in, starts sharing more about, that then attracts really cool career opportunities for her. Like she could be hired to be like an antique or thrifting sourcer for someone who like wants to pay her to do that. You know what I mean? Or she could work with a brand that's all about like upcycling or reselling or something like that, just because she's made that more known, a more known part about herself. Or if you want to think about it like more traditionally, professionally, the way that I do it is when I talk about like career coaching and public speaking, that's part of my career. And so I'll share when I do a really cool public speaking opportunity, and I'll share like the 3 top takeaways or something that surprised me that came up during that session, or even as a career coach that works one-on-one with people or like has a course for people to help them land a better job, I'll share a little bit about my expertise in job search strategy or interviewing or networking, and me becoming more vocal about all those things that I'm really great at has helped me build a whole business around it.
Yeah. And it sounds like that a lot of it, whether personally or professionally, is the skill of looking inward. And it's a versus of what do I like versus what am I good at, and how can those two become a Venn diagram?
Yes, I love a Venn diagram mentality. Absolutely, like in more ways than one. And here, like, you don't have to say, okay, I'm a consultant at a Big Four. Now, my personal brand has to be change management consulting at a Big Four. No, like if you're the biggest Taylor Swift fan out there, like I'm actually using a real example from one of my clients. She is a consultant at a Big Four, never wants to talk about work outside of work, but instead is incredibly crafty and is amazing at event planning. And so she like creates content around like the outfits that she created from scratch for Taylor Swift concerts, and like throwing dinner parties, and how she creates a community in her city. And that has gained her a following, yes, but also like really awesome opportunities to turn that into something like a side hustle or a professional avenue that she still does on top of being a consultant at a Big Four.
Yeah, you don't have to have one or the other, I feel like is what you're saying.
Yes.
You don't have to be a Big Four person and have that be your life and your brand and your identity. And you don't have to be a huge Taylor Swift fan and go in that direction either. You can have a healthy balance of both, and both can work in a healthy way. But the whole point is what I'm hearing you say, Janelle, is that a personal brand is you to the core, and it takes a lot of self-awareness. And I think looking in the mirror, that if someone wants to build something that is passionate to them, A, where does your passion lie? And B, what does that look like in regards to balance in your life in multiple ways?
Right. Yeah. I think what I would love for anyone listening to this to take away is that your personal brand is all about choice. It's your choice. You get to choose. If we want to talk about like a Venn diagram, you get to choose how big the personal life slice is and how big the professional life slice is. If you want to capitalize or like build a personal brand for the purpose of getting ahead in your chosen industry or your chosen field that you work in, absolutely. There's so many ways to do that. If you want to use a personal brand or build a personal brand in order to have a creative outlet outside of your 9 to 5 and really express the things that you love and are great at and think about all the time that don't have to do with the job that you just do because it's good enough and it pays the bills, you can make that choice too. You can still have that 9 to 5, but also zoom in on what you're passionate about, find a way that feels natural to you to monetize that, and then have unlimited earning potential.
That's amazing.
Boom.
I know it's on your, because I watched one of your TikToks earlier today. I know it's on your vision board, but put it in the book.
Yeah, I'm definitely writing multiple books throughout my lifetime, but like, man, I really want to write a book. I don't know what the concept or the premise is yet. It'll obviously be around like owning your career, getting into the driver's seat of your own career. But yeah, I'll put that in the book for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And that is something so important that you can just, like I was saying before, like lean into yourself and just rip it.
Yeah.
Like just
rip it.
Do the fun thing.
Send it. Full send.
Literally full send. And you don't know where it can end up. And media, social media, whatever it is, has taken us in a completely different direction. And I actually think that it's really healthy to lean into that.
So I have now been building a personal brand for myself for a couple of years as a career expert, as someone who helps people clarify their career goals and build a career that they are really proud of, right? That includes job search, that includes career pivots in your 9 to 5, but it also includes like starting your own thing and a side hustle or a business or a personal brand. And so I love public speaking. And one of the things on my vision board is to have an international public speaking opportunity. Okay. Great. I could just sit around and be like, okay, I hope someone from another country emails me, finds my email address and sends me an invitation. Right? I want to go back to scrolling on my Instagram. Or what I'm actually going to do and have been doing is sitting down and thinking like, what is in my control to actually make this happen? Okay, I have a personal brand as a career expert. I actually went to school abroad. I got my master's in London, so I know a couple of people in another country, right? Why don't I tell them, which is true, I'm going to Ireland for my corporate job in April to like go to our Dublin office to deliver a thing like for my full-time corporate job. I already have plans to extend my trip to spend a couple days in London on PTO. Why don't I reach out to someone at my grad school in my department and say, hey, in the time since I've graduated, I have done X, Y, and Z in the career development space. You can see an example of one of the workshops that I've led, or you can listen to me on a podcast, or here's the outline for like a keynote session that I've delivered. Is this of interest to you? And is this of interest to you at any time, this week in April? Can I come in and like chat with one of your cohorts or talk to the graduating class here or the alumni, like whatever? Like that's an opportunity that now I can that makes sense because I put in the work to build my personal brand around it, right?
Yeah, everything that I'm hearing that you're saying is you already have it. Just use it.
Yes. And what I would say to you listening is, you already have it. You already think about whatever it is you think about. You already have spicy takes and hot opinions about whatever you're passionate about. Maybe it is your full-time job, like you're in e-commerce or you're in social media or I don't know, you're a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And you already have like strong opinions. Okay, share that. At the very beginning of our conversation, when you asked me what is a personal brand, the first way that I described it is how someone would describe you when you're not there. So how can someone describe you and your passions and your interests and what you're an expert at if you never tell them what that is?
Yeah.
So the first part is actually taking what's in your brain, putting your thought leadership into action. And then the second part is the really non-sexy part that most people don't do, is to keep doing that over and over and over and over again. Consistency.
Yeah.
A lot of people where I see them fall short who have the potential to build really powerful, lucrative, profitable personal brands as one pillar of their career, a place where I see a lot of them fall short is like doing it once or twice, not seeing traction, and then thinking they're not cut out for it.
Oh.
No one's really cut out for it. Or said another way, we're all cut out for it. But the people who actually turn it into the epic opportunities that you see on their social media, on their website, on their LinkedIn, are the ones who are just showing up and doing it and trusting that eventually they will arrive there. They're just on there and they're going to show up until they arrive. That goes back to like becoming and surthriving. Like I have recently moved into the mentality of I'm not going to give it 6 months of posting content just to see what happens. I'm not going to see how much I can grow in 1 month. Instead, I'm going to keep showing up until it happens. I'm going to keep building my personal brand until I get a book deal, but not just until, like every day after.
And beyond. Yeah.
Until all the things on my vision board for my career come true. It's not like, all right, until like for the next 90 days, we'll see what happens. No, I've changed the goalpost from a day or a time marker to an event, and I will keep showing up until I am at that event.
Yeah. Just keep swimming.
Truly.
Dory said it best. So we're talking a lot about careers, and you are a career coach. How long have you been a career coach for?
I've been a career coach my entire career. So this sounds very meta.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, girl.
Actually, like it gets like a little meta, and I'm glad we're not taking shots for every time I say the word career. My freshman year of undergrad, I became extremely depressed and I almost dropped out of school. I almost like didn't come back for sophomore year because I was like, something's not right. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't see the point in anything. But the one thing that kept me coming back for sophomore year was that I got like a student role as like a peer career coach at our career center at school. And so what that meant was helping other students with their resume reviews, with their cover letters, with their mock interviewing, with using our internship and job portal database, in helping on-campus recruitment and hosting events for employers. And I fell in love with that. And I stayed in that kind of like student volunteer role for the next 3 years during undergrad. So like I really credit that role, that like volunteer position, as what kept me afloat and what like just helped me survive in college. And then it was just like a beautiful coupling of things that I'm really good at. And I realized through taking more classes around it that like organizational psychology was a thing that I could study and get a job in. And so that's what I got my first job out of college in, and became like a career development expert at all the companies that I've worked at.
That's so important. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that you were in a bad mental health space. It is such an honest conversation that I think we need to have with ourselves and each other, because you never know how close you are to someone else who is battling a mental health issue and feels like they're literally just surviving. And again, that's the whole point of this podcast and the theme, that you felt you were in a survival space and you landed this opportunity. Maybe at the time we're like, I don't really know what this is, but I'm just going to do it because it's an obligation. And you showed up and something went off in your head that this is something I'm passionate about. It pulled out an inner Janel that maybe was always there. And now you've really built it into this 6-figure scaling business. And I'm just proud of you. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think what you hit on something really important there is like the inner Janelle, but that's really the cool potential that all of us have in owning our career, is bringing the inner you out and celebrating that, and just telling people, hey, like this is something that I know a lot about. This is something that I'm interested in, something that I'm learning. And you can use that inner you and the process of becoming more you as a way to like be more fulfilled in your career.
Yeah. What are the top reasons that you see someone would want to land a better 9-to-5?
Oh my gosh. The biggest reason I see among like our peers and women who are in our age group is just reaching their ceiling and feeling like I have nowhere else to go from here. Like I've done all the growing that I can. I am not intellectually stimulated. I am not challenged. What the hell else do I do? That, and which like contributes to burnout, a feeling of burnout, right? When you keep doing something for no reward. That, and realizing that maybe they never really wanted to be on the path that they are on to begin with. And they've been a little too afraid to make a change, to explore other areas, or maybe like research something else, because we were all so conditioned to just like stay the course. Your parents invested all this money in a degree. How dare you think about doing something else, until they finally give themselves the permission to think about something else.
Yeah, give themselves permission to thrive somewhere else and look where they can evolve and, you know, we keep saying it, but become a different version of themselves.
And I would say the most surprising thing to most of these individuals that I've coached is that they are actually very qualified to do other things, and that their experience up until now has not been a waste at all. And so one of my favorite things to remind them and remind you listening is you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. Most of your experience is very transferable, and you are very qualified to do other things. What I'd love for someone to take away from this is that like you can choose to pivot. You can choose to do something else. You can choose to stay where you are and add something else in, right? Like you are in charge of the equation and what it all looks like. So maybe it doesn't have to be like cut and dry, like, well, I'm not this anymore and now I'm going to be this. If that's the right solution for you, amazing. But maybe you're like, I'm this and I also want to be that. It's like you don't have to give up part of your identity, and you don't have to make a huge dramatic change if that's not the right move for you.
When it comes to landing a better 9-to-5, as a career coach, what do you advise as the first step for someone?
Clarity. Full stop. If you are not clear on the destination, you'll either never get there, or it will be a very hellish journey to get there. Clarity, clarity, clarity on where you are going. And I know that that is often the most difficult, challenging part, because it requires self-awareness, it requires time, it requires space. And when you get to the point, often when you're ready to make a change, you've been ready for a while and you just want to get into action. But if you are not clear on what you want next, it's going to be so much harder to actually get there. How
would you advise someone to find that clarity if they really are stuck and don't know?
There are so many different ways to do it. I have a couple of like proven exercises in my course, Pivot with Purpose. And one of the biggest ones is thinking about your energizers and your drainers, but make it more intentional instead of just like listing like a 2-column list of like, here's everything that energizes me about my day job and here's everything that drains me. What I want you to do is challenge yourself to ask yourself why the drainers actually drain you. So don't just take it at face value. So for example, when I was an executive assistant in the very beginning of my career, there were a lot of things that energized me about that job, but it wasn't the perfect job for me. And a lot of my drainers were like, I get drained by having to organize someone's calendar, and I get drained by never really knowing what the day is going to throw at me, blah, blah, blah. So let's just take those 2 examples. And I had to ask myself, okay, why am I drained by being in charge of someone else's calendar? Why? What is at the root of that? Oh, because I don't like feeling like I am 100% responsible for all of the nuances of someone's day. That's too much pressure at 23 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, why does that drain? And keep asking yourself why. And then you will arrive at an idea of what you do want in your next job. So if we take that example, I don't want to be fully responsible for someone else's day because I'm afraid that something's going to fall through the cracks. So how can I turn that into an affirmative statement about what I am looking for in my next job? That might sound like I'm looking for a role or a job where I can anticipate usually what's coming next. Or I work on a predictable cyclical cycle, right? And like things aren't changing that often. Like maybe that is you. Maybe you want like predictability, structure, etc. Or maybe you're the opposite and you're like, actually, that sounds super draining and boring for me. I need variety every single day. But the clarity of where you land there is what's important, because then you start to eliminate a lot of potential jobs and careers. And that's actually very freeing if you can eliminate possibility, because having too much possibility just leads to decision fatigue.
Yeah, and disappointment. I keep going back to the power of knowing yourself. And I think as 30-something-year-old women, we are coming into this phase of thriving, evolving, and knowing who the F you are.
Yeah.
And that speaks to what you just said of this exercise that you do with career clients.
That's like radical self-responsibility. And that is what I truly think helps you thrive, is by being radically responsible for yourself and your outcomes.
Someone is looking to give themselves permission to evolve. How do you advise them through that process?
So what I would tell the person who is afraid to evolve and afraid to try something new, who's thinking, what if I fail? What if I'm not good at it? What if I don't like it? I would tell them, well, you're already doing pretty great at something you don't like, right? You're already excelling at a job you hate. I'm willing to bet that like you're really good at your job, you just fucking hate it. Can I curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
You just fucking hate it.
Hell yeah.
So why can't you be great at something you actually enjoy? But you're never going to know that until you let yourself try it.
I think our generation has had a fear of failure for a long time. And I've noticed a shift within my friends, people in my community who are just showing up and saying, I tried this, I hated it. Mm-hmm. I want people to listen to know that. That is okay.
Yeah. And listener, if you need evidence, I'm so happy being that example for you. Listen, I checked off all of the boxes to excel in my corporate career, literally from what I majored in college is what I interned in my senior year of college is what I got hired to do right after graduation. I literally followed the steps A, B, C, D, checked off all the boxes and said, I'm actually so unhappy. And the thought of applying for this same role again sounds like hell. So let me try something different. Let me start my own business. Let me be a solo entrepreneur. Let me figure out how to be a one-woman show and sell my expertise and create my own brand. And I did it. And it really worked. And some parts of it I loved, and some parts of it I absolutely hated. So then 3 years later, I was back there in the same place saying, oh, if I continue on this path, I am not going to be happy. Let me do something else. And so now I'm on chapter 3 of my career where it's not either or, it's both and. And I can't say if I'm going to be happy again doing this in another 3 years, but for now I am. And for now I see like a really sustainable path to fulfillment, professional fulfillment, to becoming, to knowing myself better, to trying new things. So if you're listening to this, just like, okay, great. I'm happy to be your example.
Pivoting a little bit, you recently did a live podcast interview with Cheval from She is Cheval, the shoe designer, on glowing up in 2024. Can you tell us and listeners how you coordinated that event, advice to anyone wanting to do something similar, and just the overall experience?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is a really perfect example of turning my personal brand and what I love to do into a business. So I was just scrolling Twitter, and someone that I don't even follow but just showed up on my feed was marketing an event that she was participating in at a Kendra Scott. So big caveat to this is my live podcast episode with Cheval was hosted at Kendra Scott Soho. And so a couple months ago, I was scrolling Twitter. I saw this like promo marketing collateral for like a panel discussion that was happening at a Kendra Scott store in Austin. And the woman that was on my Twitter feed was speaking at it. And so she was sharing that marketing collateral. And the panel had nothing to do with jewelry, which is what Kendra Scott is. It's a jewelry brand. It's a great jewelry brand. I love their stuff. But the panel of like 4 speakers was about like financial wellness or something like that. It's like, hang on a second, that's interesting. I'm a public speaker and I'm trying to build my personal brand as a public speaker to become even bigger. That sounds like an opportunity that I could do. Like I can see myself in that seat. And it's surprising to me that this panel has nothing to do with the business of jewelry or selling jewelry. And so that got me curious. That started to get me thinking like, okay, so this person is not the traditional person that I would expect to see on a panel with this brand. That tells me, one, that this brand is open to non-traditional partnerships, right? And 2, that there may be a space for me in that room. Maybe I could have a seat at that table if this person could have a seat at that table. So what you just heard was curiosity and a healthy dose of self-belief, right? Because like I believe that I could actually do that because I have evidence that I've done it before. And that's all you need. It's just like one past example that you've done it before to prove that you could do it again.
Yeah.
Right? And so then here is where resourcefulness comes in. I happen to know someone who works for Kendra Scott Corporate. She is a very loose second degree connection, or she was a very loose second degree connection. By this point that now we're having this conversation, she's a very close first degree connection. But she and I already had a very positive, warm relationship. Okay. So I had a strong, positive relationship with an individual who could open the door for opportunity for me. And so I didn't even have her phone number at that point. I just had her, we were just Instagram friends. So the way that we were connected is my absolute best friend from college, my roommate back in college, like her daughters are like, I consider them my nieces. She lives in the suburbs and she is friends with this woman who also lives in her town and has kids who go to the same classes and stuff, who works for Kendra Scott. Okay. So I saw that like second degree connection. I had a level of self-belief and I was a little bit curious and creative about opportunity. So I ended up sliding into this girl's DMs and we already had like a good positive rapport, but like we're not best friends. I didn't even have her phone number. But I sent her the screenshot of the marketing kind of like picture promo that I saw on Twitter. I said, hey, I just saw something really cool on Twitter. I didn't know that Kendra Scott did this. That's so awesome. And she's like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's something we love to do because actually a big pillar of our brand is philanthropy and giving back. And so anytime that we can put on an event or have a strategic partnership that helps benefit the nonprofits that we love to give back to, we're always open to that kind of conversation. And so then here is when I actually just pitched myself. It's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, as you know, like I'm a career expert. I've helped hundreds of people make career pivots and figure out what they want to do next in their careers. And public speaking is something I've done a lot. do you think that a New York or New Jersey store would be interested in kind of like a career panel or like a how to elevate your career? And so here I already had examples, or I already had ideas that I could picture. What I didn't do is say, hey, I'm really good at these things. What do you think would work? I didn't make her do the work of figuring out what the solution is. I gave her very specific examples of what could work. And that made her job a lot easier to either say yes or no. So,
because you know your skill best.
Exactly. So I think what's important for anyone listening here is like, yes, you have to have that self-belief. Yes, be creative and curious, but also come to the table with specific ideas, and maybe they'll be vetoed, but that gets the ball rolling. It's not helpful to give someone that you're already pitching yourself to make them do more work to figure out what the idea is. Come to them with the idea, and then you can shape shift it or evolve it from there. And so she's like, oh my gosh, wait, that actually makes a lot of sense. I love that. And so note here that she already was familiar with my personal brand as a speaker and as a career expert. So there was trust there. Like, she knew what I was about. She had familiarity with at least like my personal brand, and she trusted that I could actually deliver what I said I was going to deliver. And I wasn't just like, wait, what? This girl wants to talk about career. I've never heard her talk about career pivots ever in my life. Why do I trust that she could do this?
You're just someone coming out of the woods saying, exactly. I'm good at this.
Because I put in the reps and I just keep showing up to build this personal brand. So now I have something to point to. So she put me in touch with the head of the Kendra Scott Soho store. He was totally game. We're like, yes, it sounds great. One of the organizations that we have a great partnership that we always love to give back to is Cheval's foundation, A Girl You Might Know Foundation. So maybe that could make sense. But this idea was not fully formed. It wasn't fully baked. And we weren't even really sure if this is something that the Cheval team would want to do. And so when I first pitched this was actually like last fall. It was at least 6 months ago.
Wow.
That I pitched it.
I didn't know that.
And I think that's really important to talk about too, because I didn't hear back from them for a long time. And like originally we were thinking about an event in late November, early December. And so we were having this conversation around September. It was like, great, like amazing way to end the year. And then it just kind of fell off with the holidays and I didn't hear back from them. And I was like, wow, okay, well, who knows what could have happened? I could have made up so many stories about what that says about me and my worth as someone to partner with, or how good I really am at my job, but I didn't make up those stories. I just trusted that the opportunity will come back around when the time is right. And to think it was like the weird like limbo week between Christmas and New Year's when no one's really on, the Kendra Scott store manager popped back into my inbox and was like, hey, we got some go ahead. I've been doing some stuff behind the scenes. Everyone is so energized around this. Why don't we shoot for early January? So like 2 weeks.
It's a go.
Like, okay, sure. Okay. Great.
And there you were thinking maybe like this wasn't going to happen, or they lacked interest in the topic or whatever it may be.
Exactly. And I had to be ready to go in like 2 weeks. And they were like, great, let's get on the phone with the Cheval team in 2 days. Are you good to pitch it? Yes. Obviously, my email was like, absolutely. And here's some client, here's some like, blah, 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 and here's what I'm thinking about the structure. Blah, blah, blah. But then like in the background, I'm that meme of Kermit the Frog, like violently typing on the laptop, trying to like put together like a run of show or whatever. So here's another thing that you'll hear, and I want you to take away from it, is just like taking super, super responsibility over the outcome. Like if I'm the one that pitched this, I better have my point of view. And whether or not they want to use that point of view is their decision. But I cannot show up to this meeting being like, whatever works for you. No, I'm open. I'm easy. Absolutely not.
You have to own it.
I better come to that meeting saying, in my experience, what I've seen work best is XYZ. So my recommendation is we structure the event this way. And here's how I can contribute. And here's how the other partner can contribute. What do you think about that? That was so much more helpful and got me so much easier buy-in and excitement from everyone to work with me than if I was just like, oh my gosh, no, whatever works for you. Like, I'm totally open. Whatever, like, I don't care.
In those situations, you can't be lenient because you're also just dealing with people's time.
Exactly.
And energy and trying to build something that has passion behind it.
Exactly.
And nobody has time to waste when they're trying to coordinate an event.
Truly. And so fast forward, I just like, did I have live mics? No, but I figured out how to get them. Did I have the questions? No, but you better believe I have done this before, so I know how to like conduct an interview and put together questions for a sub. Everything from like A to Z. I was ready. I like rose to the occasion, let's say. And I think that's what made it so successful, is that like I took ownership over the whole opportunity. And I spent that entire day doing something that I like.
Yeah.
From the prep leading up to it, to the getting ready, to the figuring things out to make it work. That's exciting for me. And then to actually like be in the moment of conducting an interview, to facilitate a conversation around career development, to connect with people in an audience that way, and to answer their questions afterwards. That is what I would put on my list of energizers for work. So great. That was a successful work day.
That's amazing. I love that you said that, and I can just tell you're so passionate about it. And I love that. It's inspiring.
Maybe too much.
Because, no, it energizes me, and I hope it energizes listeners that there is something out there that you can thrive in, and you can take anything from a survival phase and make it into thriving. Janel is a walking, living example of that. And I can just tell at the end of the day, you have fun. You have fun. You like it.
Literally, what is the point?
Life is too short to do shit that you don't like.
No, truly.
No, literally.
Let's just have some more fun with it.
So speaking of 2024, that was a 2024 event. And like I said, it was phenomenal. With your personal brand, and, you know, now we're basically in February, but rolling into the new year and this whole era that we're in about personal branding, what's something that you're looking forward to?
What is something that I'm looking forward to in 2024? I'm really excited to pour myself even more into my own brand of content, which is Modern Mavericks. So like get those episodes out, get the newsletter out, really like refine and hone in and speak directly to the person who identifies as a modern maverick, as like someone who like is not okay with just doing work the old fashioned way and wants a career that's dynamic and fulfilling and different. Yeah. I think this conversation has made me realize in the process of talking it out that like, at least it's my point of view, that thriving is a product of just taking responsibility for yourself and your outcomes. And that's like that's what I'm taking away from this conversation, like having it out loud. But you thrive when you can be able to say like, oh no, I was in the driver's seat. I took control. I had autonomy, and I'm responsible for the outcome. And I'm pretty proud of the outcome.
Yeah.
Look how that turned out.
You have choice in life, and that is something that's really important. Janel, thank you so much for coming on the Surthriving podcast. I'm so glad we made this work, especially in person.
I know.
I'm so happy to be your friend and just learn off of you. I can't wait to just do things in 2024. And shout out to Cheeto for being here too.
You guys, Cheeto was the real MVP of this whole episode.
She doesn't
BRB while I
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Surthriving. I hope you took some helpful information away from it and are feeling inspired. If you know someone who is surviving or thriving and would benefit from hearing this episode, feel free to send it over to them. Remember, sharing is caring. To leave a review or rating of the show, head to Spotify to follow, rate, and let me know what you think. All information about today's episode, guest, and podcast social handles will be in the description, so don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date.